slightly different here. And the sources we're looking at are a little bit more technical. This is all of this is a translation from the Shulchan Aruch. And if you look at the final page, I put a little bit of the tiniest bio. The Shulchan Aruch, which is literally this, translates to the set table, and there's a weird closed parenthesis there for no good reason. The most widely consulted of the various legal codes in Judaism, authored in Sfat by Rabbi Yosef Karo in 1563, published in Venice 2 years later, with its commentaries, the most widely accepted compilation of Jewish law ever written. It's based in a lot of ways is the starting place for halakhic discourse in the modern era. It's not the only place, it's not the stopping place, but it's often the starting place. And it's written, as I said, by Rabbi Yosef Karo, using the model that came from the halakhic compendium that immediately preceded it, called the Tur. Doesn't really matter. He is coming at it from a Sephardic worldview. At the same time as he was working on this compendium, there was another guy, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, who was doing exactly the same thing in the lands of Ashkenazi, in the Ashkenazi Jewish world. So instead of publishing a separate document, they mushed them together, and it became what's known as the gloss. It is the tablecloth to the set table, if you will. In the document, we'll look at the very first one for the moment. You'll see about halfway through there is a bold phrase, REM Chupchik A. Stands for the Ramah, which stands for Rabbi Moshe Isserles. Everybody with me so far? Any questions?
You said, so is that back in front?
Yeah, so if you look at the very top section here, right?
Yeah.
It's in English, it's bold. It says Ramah or
Okay.
Rema or something like that. Ramah is usually it's understood. The font is slightly smaller because I wanted it to look like it looks in the Shulchan Aruch. I'm sorry if it's too small. The Ramah is taking the Ashkenazi worldview, and you will see that sometimes they disagree. And it's already a great start for us to see that on the same page, in the same paragraph, we have rabbis who disagree on various subjects. This is a lot of text. We are not going to read the whole thing, I promise you. I mean, if we were here for like a few more hours, maybe we would, but we're not going to. The reason why I gave you so much is because I want you to have access to it later. I want you to be able to read it later if you have a question. I've sort of cut out all of the stuff that I think is less interesting. The most interesting stuff is here from the whole section of Hanukkah. And so the question I want us to think about is not just like, what are the technical rules? I mean, technical rules are fun if that's your thing. My parents are accountants, so like the technical rules, comes by. I come by it honestly, but I want us to think about why the rabbis are making the point they're making. Why are they ruling a particular way? Is everybody with me so far? Okay. Let's start at the beginning. Can I get a volunteer to read Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 670, the very first one, in English? You don't have to read the Hebrew. Yeah, please.
There's no mic. Are they here?
Yeah.
Okay. On the 25th of Kislev, we begin the 8 days of Hanukkah and are prohibited from eulogizing and fasting, but are permitted to do labors. The women have made it a custom not to do labor while the candles are burning. And there is an opinion that says that we may not be lenient with them and let them work.
Okay, so here we learn on the 25th Kislev, which begins tonight, we begin the 8 days of Hanukkah, and we're prohibited from giving eulogies and fasting. Now, I want to be clear that the rabbis almost always will find a way to call it anything but a eulogy in order to do it still, because we want to honor the people who've died. And we are permitted to do labors. What kind of labors are we talking about? Cooking, right? Stuff that you might be permitted on Shabbat or on a Chag day. On Hanukkah, that's not an issue, right? We're being told it's not like Sukkot. And then it has this interesting note, right? That again, we're going to use the category of women here is really referring to a category that doesn't exist any longer. But this in his day and time, where really women were in a second social class, things were different. And so here they have an opinion that it was a custom not to do labor while the candles were burning, and that there was those who would say, "Oh, we should prevent them, or we should make them go back to work, or whatever." But that they were not being forced to go back to work; they were really given a chance to to like have Hanukkah be like a Hanukkah moment, right? This special moment.
Would it be similar to Rosh Chodesh?
I don't think it's as strong as Rosh Chodesh in terms of a cultural connection, but in the sense that you can do labors, yes, it's like Rosh Chodesh. Okay, let's keep going. One more paragraph. Can I get a different volunteer to read? Yes, please. I'll come to you next. I see.
The many meals that people add on Hanukkah are voluntary meals, since the sages did not establish them as days of feasting and joy.
All right, I'm going to pause you there for a second. Okay, so now we get the next rule. Again, this is how the Shulchan Aruch begins the conversation on Hanukkah. It's already a pretty interesting place to start. So what do we know is true when we do a Jewish holiday? One of the first things we start planning? Food. We got to have the meal. Here we're learning that on the meals on Hanukkah are voluntary meals. They're not like Erev Rosh Hashanah dinner or Seder or Sukkot where you have Kiddush at the beginning. It's not like that. But they are days of feasting and joy. And now we get there's all the Sephardic worldview and very much standard here for all of us. And here we get the Ramah's first opinion. Go for it.
Some say that there is somewhat of a mitzvah in adding meals, because during these days, celebrate the dedication of the altar. We are accustomed to reciting additional hymns and songs of praise during the feasts. Thus, they become commanded meals in contrast to voluntary. Some say that cheese should be eaten during Hanukkah because a miracle was done through milk, which is redeemed the enemy.
Wonderful. Okay, so here we get a couple more pieces, which is to say, the Ramah is saying, it's like kind of a mitzvah to add meals. Like it's not a mitzvah, it's sort of a mitzvah. I already like where he's going. He's got these layers of meals here, and we're accustomed to adding extra songs and songs of praise. We add Hallel to Hanukkah, and that these meals, as a result, become slightly more than voluntary in the sense that they get some weight to them. We sing during these meals. They got some weight to them. And then we have the association with Judith feeding cheese to Sisera, I think his name was. Thank you. Sisera is who Yael killed in a similar way, and he died, and therefore we celebrate that also. So, okay, with all of that being said, what are some of the values, Jewish values, that we're starting to see in just this little bit?
There is some concern for women.
Right. There is certainly a consciousness of women's presence in Hanukkah, right, which isn't always true in Jewish holidays. Anything else?
And it sounds like they didn't have customs or anything. Well, they didn't, because Hanukkah is a late holiday. And they're sort of making them up.
Certainly by the mid 1500s, there had been accumulated enough customs around Hanukkah, but it's certainly not where he starts. Right? The rules aren't so rigid in a way that maybe a Passover Seder or a Sukkot might be.
I have one question.
Yeah.
In the Hebrew side, I see the word mitchadim in brackets. That is, at least I think I see it.
Yeah.
That is like local custom or
Yeah. So on the Hebrew side, I tried to be as make the English as similar to the Hebrew as possible.
Yeah.
So in those cases, those are references to books. So in the first set of brackets, it's Abraham Carr of Prague, the Mahara of Prague. The Minhagim refers to a book of customs, and then the Kolbo and the Ran are also references to different halachic people. Yeah, good catch though. Close reading. Yeah. Oh no.
So it is the other aspects relate to one, what the nature of celebration is essentially, that is singing as well as eating. I think this aspect of just noting that it was a dedication of the altar, that they're maybe trying to say we in some ways we need to be conscious of that or reenact a little bit of that.
Great. So here we're starting already to get a definition. What is how do we define, expressing joy in a Jewish holiday context? Eating, singing, things like that. And we know that it's true elsewhere. And here we get a pretty clear definition that's what that looks like, even if it's not required in some way. And then second, right, the Rabbi Yosef Karo doesn't include it, but the Ramah says, we're celebrating something specific here, right? We're not just talking about Hanukkah, we're talking about a specific action that is taking place. Love it. All right, let's keep going. Can I get another volunteer to read the next bit? Over here. Yes, I hadn't forgotten it. Read, I'm gonna have you read both, but read the first one first.
One needs to be very diligent in the kindling of Hanukkah candles. Even a poor person living off charity should lend or sell their clothes and buy oil for kindling.
All right, pause there for a second. What is this? Will you just summarize what you just read for a moment? Will you summarize it for me?
That we're giving to the poor, and that it says we sell their clothes and buy oil for kindling, so make sure that we have oil for kindling.
Right. So it's not that we're giving tzedakah.
No.
It's that if you are a person who lives off of the tzedakah of others, you should sell your clothes and buy oil for Hanukkah. Now, first of all, that is an outrageous statement. That is an outrageous statement. So if we don't, I'm sorry.
Especially in Cleveland,
Right. It is so cold outside, right? Okay. So certainly these people are not living in Cleveland and probably were not experiencing the snow that you experience for sure. But let's
Wait a minute. But those people, I'm sorry, I can't.
It's okay. You're good. You're good. Go for it.
Announce you. I only see the thing in front of me. They're also saying that. Wait a minute. You're lighting the candles, but the Shulchan Aruch took place. I mean, Israelis is from the north. He's from Europe.
Yes, we haven't got, so Israelis hasn't been quoted yet. Yeah, this is Rabbi Yosef Karo, but you're right. Rabbi Israelis is living in a place where snow would be common. Right? Rabbi Yosef Karo living in, where did I say? Tzfat and Venice, is probably not experiencing a particularly large amount of snow. Rabbi Israelis certainly is. So that is a good distinction.
But he certainly would have known that there were other areas where Jews were living.
For sure. For sure.
I mean,
Yeah,
this is
sorry.
1500s. It's not.
I think his point, the point is, this is a really important mitzvah.
If we're setting a set of scale, sell the clothes off your back for Hanukkah, which again, I think is outrageous, but it's telling us something about what Rabbi Yosef Karo thinks is important. For a holiday that has voluntary meals, what is the most important part of this holiday, according to Rabbi Yosef Karo?
The lighting of the
Light those candles. Get the oil ready and light those candles. All right, keep reading.
How many lights should one kindle? On the first night, one candle, one light. Afterward, add one each night until on the last night, when there will be 8. Even if the household members are many, they should not kindle more. Rama, some say that every one of the household members should kindle, and such is the widespread custom. And they should take care to each place their lights in a unique place, so that it will be apparent how many lights they are kindling.
Great. Now we see one of our first major differences. Rabbi Yosef Karo says, how many lights did you light? On the first night, you light 1, and keep going until you get 8 over the course of the week, the 8 days. And here's the major difference. Even if the household members are many, they should not kindle more, meaning to say 1 menorah, 1 house. How many of you in your house follow that custom? Yeah, okay. So the Rabbi Moshe Isserles suggests that is not the only way to do it, right? Some say, which is a great rabbinic way of introducing, there are other opinions here, right? Yesh Omrim, and if you look in the Hebrew, I always like for us to learn a little bit of the grammar and stuff so that we can take that knowledge to the next class, wherever that may be. If we're in the right side, we're in the second paragraph with the bet at the beginning with the bold Haggah in the middle, which is introducing the Ramah. It says it has the Vav, Yud, Chupchik, and then Aleph. And that is an abbreviation for Yesh Omrim. There are those who say, or some say. So there are those who say, or some say, that every one of the household members should kindle their own. That's from the Maimonides. And such is the widespread custom. So now he's proving his case. This is common. We've seen this before. This is regular. But here's the part. Wait, before I come to you, Ron. And this is the part that I think is so fascinating. And they should take care to each place their lights in a unique place, so that it would be apparent how many lights they're kindling. So what is he imagining? That everybody's lighting their menorahs.
They hit their own
They
menorah.
They all have their own menorah, and they're all lighting them all in the same place. So that if you're looking at it from the window, you can't really tell how many nights there are. There's like 1 million candles sitting in the window. So what does he say? He says you should put it in different places so it's recognizable. So when at home, for example, when my wife and I light Hanukkah candles, we put them in separate windows on different parts of the house, so that everybody, if anybody's walking by, they can see. Ron, please.
Seeing that this follows the paragraph before, if you have enough money for one set of candles, and you're supposed to sell your clothes for the second set.
If you, I'm sorry, spell it out for me.
In the first paragraph, it says if you don't have enough money for the oil, that you sell your clothes. So now I'm saying, what if you have enough for the first set of candles, but not for the second set of candles?
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
sell your clothes
yeah.
for those?
yeah. So it doesn't, I don't think it says it here. It might be in a different section that I've excluded. The Gemara certainly says that it is sufficient to light a single candle for every, like, what I mean to say is every night of Hanukkah, a single candle will suffice to fulfill the mitzvah. Meaning to say on night 6, if I light a single candle, that still fulfills the obligation. But the Gemara says the Mahadrin, right? They light more each night. And the Mahadrin mean a Mahadrin that every person has their own menorah that lights every single night. So again, we've already got to get scales here. So let's say you're in a rush, it's night 6. You don't even have the candles. All of them are broken in your box because somehow they give you a box and half of them are broken. You could light one and fulfill the obligation. But you're right. Here, there's a tension here, which is to say, what is really the expectation? Yeah, Larry.
Going back to what you said about why there is a difference, and I'm wondering if because, first part of it, Gemara is Ashkenazi, and you said that the Gemara is Sephardic. If you're in Svat,
No, it's the other way around. Karo is
Karo.
okay.
Yeah. So Karo is in Svat. Everybody's Jewish. I mean, it was a Jewish enclave at that time, I would think. Whereas if you're Sephardic, you know, it may not be that populated. And so you're doctor kind of saying in your face, you know, we are here, we are doing this. And, you know, sort of like what we're going through now in some ways of
interesting, right?
saying, you know, I'm sort of relating it to the anti-Semitism that may have been there.
Yeah.
Because they were not the majority, where it's what I would assume they probably maybe were.
That's a really interesting idea, which is to say that perhaps in Svat, where there was a greater population of Jews, although it certainly wasn't exclusively Jews, that perhaps the idea that you might want more and more and more menorahs was less valuable. And therefore, in the Ashkenazi lands, having more menorahs was a greater statement. The only challenge to that is that it was still really, really dangerous to be a Jew, and more menorahs doesn't necessarily make you safer. But it's an interesting, compelling point that I've never thought of before. So I think it still has merit in our discussion.
There's also the point of if there's that big of a community of Jews, that everybody knows how many candles there are. You don't have to worry about putting it in a separate window.
For sure. Right. Meaning to say, everybody knows it's night 6. We don't need to worry about whether or not it's different numbers. Yeah. Other Larry.
What you said, I think yesterday, about putting it in the window so others can see. Are the others other Jews or non-Jews as well?
So the answer, I think, is yes. I mean, for the most part, rabbis, the rabbis of the Talmud certainly are living in cosmopolitan, diverse communities, not living exclusively amongst Jews. My sense is that these communities also are living in and around Jews and non-Jews together. That being said, and I don't know the timing, this is published in Venice. Venice and other places in Italy, certainly in this era, were the initiators of the ghettos, right? And so there isn't necessarily that type of overlap at night. So again, I answer it that way because I don't know the answer to your question, but it's a good one. But I think in general, most sources that we read that are not modern are living in and around other people. They're experiencing other cultures. Certainly in the Talmud, and maybe certainly in Spain, Maimonides, things like that. But as it gets later and it gets harder and harder for Jews to live safely amongst others, and they are forced into smaller and smaller spaces, that becomes less the case. I'm going to read the next paragraph just a little bit, and then I want to go to the next one about where I want to move on because the 672, which is a little bit away from here, speaks to your question in some way. So in number 4, it says, if one filled a bowl with oil and surrounded it with wicks, if one covered it with a vessel separating the wicks, each wick counts as one light. Meaning, say, if you have a menorah, it's like got a basin for all the oil together, and it's got spaces for all of the different lights, and it's separated out before you light it, that counts. However, if you didn't cover it with a vessel and you just got the wicks floating around in the oil, it's considered like kemidura. It is like a bonfire, meaning to say you can't distinguish between the lights, right? And therefore it doesn't count. It's insufficient. And here the Ramah says something. Every time I go to I see like fancy artistic menorahs,
Yeah.
it's the next sentence that makes me the most afraid for people, which is that the Ramah says the following: therefore, one should be careful to place the lights in a straight line, in a straight row, and not in a circle, since that is like a bonfire. Meaning to say, if it's in a straight line and you're looking at it, you can tell how many lights there are. But if it's in a circle shape and you're looking at it sideways, how many candles can you see? You can see all of them. You have no idea how many lights there are. So every time I see an artistic menorah, I like cringe. I'm like, oh goodness gracious, someone's going to buy this, and it's not going to be kosher little mitzvah, and it's going to be a problem.
It's
Here's the
also
point.
it's also no good if it's like one high and one low, one high. You know, the one with the
Right, in a similar way, right? In a similar way, you can't distinguish between the heights. Sheila has a really wonderful point. Here's what the Ramah says goes on, and this part I love. It says this: it is permitted to kindle with candlesticks, which they call lampa, and that's a translation. That is a transliteration of what's here. It literally uses the word lampa, since each light is separated greatly from the other. Meaning to say, here we generally in the Hebrew use the word ner for candle, and here we're using a different word, which is a lamp, which we now know is a lamp, right? We use that similar language. So already 450 years ago, the word lamp existed, which I think is just an amazing piece of history that's included here. So meaning to say, the menorah doesn't actually have to be attached to each other. They could be separate candlesticks. Like you could have all your Shabbos candlesticks in a row, and that could count. One should be careful when preparing lights, even with wax, right? So not all wax is still here, not to stick them together and kindle them, since that would be considered like a bonfire. Even with the lights of Shabbat and holy days, one should be careful not to do so. All right, so we should be careful. We don't want them all to stick together, so we can't tell the difference. So the value here that we're learning is you should be able to distinguish the lights. That matters, because if the mitzvah is presuming, he said, we're publicizing the miracle, and you can't tell the difference of how many lights there are, have you really publicized the miracle? Yes.
But if you fulfill the mitzvah with just one candle, then the bonfire is fulfilling it.
It's a good point. It's a good point. I don't know how to resolve that. That's a really good, that's a great challenge. I think the rabbis would say the following, which is to say that the simplicity of a single candle, right, refers to that day. But if you have multiple candles and it's like a medura, it's like a bonfire, it's like it makes it all mixed up, and so therefore you can't make a distinction. That is what I think the rabbis would say. Whether or not you find that a satisfying answer is fair, yeah. But it's a great point. It's a great challenge. Yeah.
Once someone's trying to get on this meeting,
Yes.
you tell me what the meeting ID is?
The meeting ID it's the one for the Shabbat morning cafe, the Torah study.
On Shabbat morning.
Yeah, and the password is
Torah,
Torah.
Yeah, Torah.
small t.
Okay,
Just have trouble getting on.
okay, yeah, that's all, I think the best I could tell.
Shabbat morning.
Correct. Correct. Okay,
Sorry.
can I get, yes, please, Derek.
$1 candle is more like a bonfire, so how much is it also trying to say a distinction?
Oh, I think that's a fantastic point, right? We shouldn't be using Havdalah candles for Hanukkah, yeah.
But also that several wick, the wick, having the wick separate, then is making that right.
Yeah, and not only that, but if we think about it, the themes of Havdalah and of Hanukkah are distinct. We have very distinct themes, right? Havdalah is very much about the intertwining,
Yeah.
and Hanukkah is very much about distinction. And so we're already starting to draw out those things, even just from the physical objects. Okay, let's read number 5 on the next page, page 2.
Can I read in Hebrew?
You can read it in Hebrew, please do.
נר חנוכה מניחו על פתח הסמוך
Reshut Harabim.
לרשות
Harabim.
הרבים מבחוץ. אם הבית פתוח לרשות הרבים, מניחו על פתחו, ואם יש חצר לפני הבית, מניחו על פתח החצר. ואם היה...
Let's pause there for a second. Let's translate that. So one should place the Hanukkah light at the entrance, at like a doorway, closest to the public domain. So the rabbis had different categories for spaces. You had the public domain, which was like the highway, it's like the main road. It's the place that it has a whole measurement of how many people need to be walking through it. But it's basically the public, as distinct from the Reshut Yachid, the private space. So your house is a private space, right? So the whole thing with like an eruv is about mixing those two spaces together. So here, which is to say, you should put your Chanukiah closest to the public domain on the outside, meaning to say out on the outside. That's why it's certainly in Israel, you actually see boxes outside people's houses, right? Because it's in the Reshut Harabim, it's in the public. If there is a courtyard in front of the house, and therefore you're not facing the public domain, one should place it at the entrance of the courtyard, meaning to say between you and the courtyard. So for example, if you lived in an apartment building and it was like empty in the middle, right? And you weren't facing the public, then the courtyard is your little mini public. Keep going. Imhaya, 4th line.
אם היה דר בעלייה שאין לו פתח פתוח לרשות הרבים, מניחו בחלון הסמוך לרשות הרבים. ובשעת הסכנה, שאינו רשאי לקיים המצווה, מניחו על שולחנו, ודיו וצריך נר אחד להשתמש לאורו, ואם יש מדורה, אין צריך נר אחד, ואם הוא אדם חשוב שאין דרכו להשתמש לאור המדורה, צריך נר אחד.
Amazing. Okay. So if you live, where is it in English? So the courtyard, 5th line in the English, if one lives on the upper floor, right? So you're not on the main floor, you're on an upper floor, you live in an upper apartment, having no entrance leading to the public domain, like the apartment example I gave before, one should place it in the window that adjoins the public domain. So my very first apartment in Los Angeles, I lived at the back of the building and it was on the 2nd floor, and it didn't even face the road. Like I faced like the house next to me and the house next to me and the house next to me, and then there was the road. So the question becomes, where do I put my menorah? So I always put it closest to that because that was the road that I could actually see. So that would be an example of this. Again, that's one tiny example from West Hollywood, Los Angeles, but that's a different, that's not Cleveland. Okay. In a time of danger, and this is the part that I think we should take a moment to talk about. When one is not allowed to perform the mitzvah, I'm going to add in here in brackets safely, it is enough that one places it on their table. I'm going to pause there because the last part is about something else. How many of you grew up lighting the Hanukkah candles on the table and not at the window?
And not at where?
And not in the
There was
window.
no place on the window to put a menorah.
Okay, fine. Fair enough.
Always
Fair
on
enough.
the table.
Always on the table. Growing up, I didn't even know you would put it in the menorah. It was so accustomed. I mean, it's not a jab at my parents, certainly. It was so accustomed. I was so accustomed to the idea that we would put it on the table. I wouldn't even consider putting it somewhere else.
There is
I think
another
that-
but there's
Yeah.
another problem. You cannot put it in many other places, because if we put it on our windowsill, the wind would come through the window and blow it out. That's
cer-
what-
In
so,
December, and
right.
Cleveland, who's got the window open?
So,
Yeah,
So-
thank you, Sheila.
so certainly we have various physical challenges, whether windowsill or window, what have you. But point being, this originates in the Talmud, which means for 1800 years, Hanukkah has had an anti-Semitism clause,
Absolutely.
which I think is just a wild thing, right? I actually can't think, I'm sure we could collectively come up with other examples from other holidays, but this one is really specific.
Yeah.
Right? In a time of danger, lighted on the table.
Does it have to be outside danger? Because we never lit it on the window.
Like,
or-
if my brother's gonna bully me, that kind of thing.
No. We never lit it in the window because I never knew about that as a kid.
Right.
We never lit it on the table. We always lit it on the stove.
Yeah.
And the reason was that my grandmother died in a house fire caused by a candle.
So that's pretty reasonable.
So
I actually
that's
think,
reasonable.
that fits into the category of table. In the sense that the rabbis were not considering that someone might die in a fire. But certainly the case being, the rabbis are understanding that actually there might be exigent circumstances here in terms of location. And that there's
No, it's
there's enough variety of options here that for safety reasons, whether it's external or internal,
Well, that's why.
right? That's a fair
that's why I
point.
asked.
That the rabbis would be understanding of that. I think we see that here. Yes, Sheila.
But it's very
completely.
interesting because I know my husband used to make a big fuss about my having a big enough tray underneath it so that the candles on either end would not cause a fire.
We were talking about this as somebody said this, I think on Saturday morning or Friday night, I forget now, right? We should be chai by him. We should live by them. Right? We don't want to die, but you shouldn't be dying by the mitzvot. That would be a problem.
Yeah.
Right?
There
We
is
would live
also
by them.
another interesting thing, and this is the next line where is in several of these, there is a distinction, almost like a class distinction.
Well, we haven't gotten there yet, Sheila. I want you to hold on. We haven't
Okay.
gotten there yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want
I
to
just
say
got a
about the
copy.
minhagim from home. So I remember distinctly that my father, who grew up in Poland, and I think they were Frankel, I think they were from the Inquisition from Spain that moved up to Northern Europe and then to Eastern Europe. And so he distinctly said that we have to put it in a window where people can see you from outside. But his opinion was because they grew up among Goyim, they wanted for Jews who knew that they come safely to that house, that they have a menorah there. That was another way of being safe. Okay. And the other thing is, I until nowadays, I don't know. You light it from the right to the left or from the left to the
Ooh.
right?
Believe it-
Another
It's
problem.
in there. You are in luck. Don't you worry. All right, let's come to the end of the paragraph here. And I want to be thoughtful of time because there's lots of stuff in here. We're not going to cover it all. So here it says this, one needs a different, this is already read in Hebrew, I'm just translating it into English. At the end of the paragraph, one needs a different light for regular use, meaning to say, we're not allowed to use the Hanukkah candles other than Hanukkah, right? You can't use it to read a book. Or in the example in the Talmud is counting coins, right? It is there for the singular purpose of pursuing publicizing the miracle. and-
Monerot Shabbat,
Well,
the
I'm sorry.
same thing.
Right. Well, no, Shabbat actually doesn't have that restriction. Shabbat is very practical, actually. They used to light candles in different rooms. You would light the two candles, so you'd have them in different rooms, so you could see.
Okay.
But here it's different. Yeah,
If I recall, when they used to send free feather for the
Pesach?
comments, didn't they put a
candle.
Hanukkah candle kind of?
so I want to make a sure distinction between the physical object that we call a Hanukkah candle, which is just, it burns over a very specific amount of time, as distinct for something we are saying the blessing over, right? Because I could light those thick Shabbat candles. I could use those for Hanukkah. There's nothing wrong with those, right? So when they say Hanukkah candle, they're talking about the things that are lit in like the menorah stands in front of you. It's an important distinction to make. right? It's really, we're talking about the menorah, a lit menorah. And here, and this is where Sheila was going to take us, here it uses, if a person is Adam Chashuv, here I've translated as a dignified person or an important person, whose way is not to use the illumination of a bonfire, one needs another light. Here, what are they describing? They're saying, if you have the Hanukkah menorah, forget the Adam Chashuv part, right? Where you're not an important person, all the rest of us, right? All right, so if I've got remember, 1500s, I've got a fire in the fireplace, I've got my Hanukkah light, I might be inclined to use the Hanukkah menorah. It's a little bit more convenient to read my book or something. I can't do that, so I got to be near the fire, the actual fire that heats my house. Here, we are learning a little bit about class, as Sheila was pointing us towards, that there's a category of person, at least in Rabbi Yosef Karo's context, of an Adam Chashuv, an important person, who doesn't deign to use the bonfire, the fireplace, to read their book. If they want to read and they don't want to use the book, they need another candle. That's what that's telling us. Sheila, what were you going to add?
No, it's okay.
Okay, so already we've got an interesting thing here in terms of class, right? And we have class of Adam Chashuv, important person. We've got the Stam Yid, whoever this individual is that we got talking about here, and we have this halachic class of women that we saw in the very beginning, right? Now, I would point you to, in another context, Rabbi Pamela Barmash's tshuva on women and mitzvot, which I'm going to poorly summarize as suggesting she makes the argument that women today wouldn't fall into the women category in halachic literature, and that effectively everybody is in the same category today. And I think it's a very compelling argument. I would strongly encourage you to read the tshuva. It's really well done. It's written in the last 10 years, certainly. So we've got a bunch of different classes here. I don't want to read everything. I want to point out a few things. Here it says it should be lit at sunset, and not to light it too late. And the whole measurement system, we're now on 672, number 1 at the second half of the paragraph, which is the goal is to have it lit until people stop passing through the marketplace. Meaning to say, you are lighting at the time where you think most people are going to be walking by you. And in a world without electricity, it's going to be around sunset. Right? People are going to be at the marketplace, they're going to be whatever, and they're all going to be on their way home from the market when it's still light. And so that's why sunset is that sweet spot. And basically, once it's at a certain time at night, then it's not an issue. Here's a complication. If I'm lighting on my kitchen table and nobody can see it, does the lighting time matter? Could I light it at 11 o'clock at night? Nobody's walking by my kitchen table but me. Something to think about. So here, I love this next part. We're now at the next one. If one did not light with sunset, either due to forgetfulness or by intention, I love it. Rabbis understand, you forget, stuff's going on. One should go ahead and light until people stop passing through the marketplace, which is approximately half an hour. Because of when people are passing and coming home, and thus the miracle is publicized. Therefore, one must place enough oil at the time so that it won't go out in time. And now I'm at the Ramah. There are those who say that in the present time, when the people light indoors, there is no need to be careful to light before people stop passing through the marketplace. So here, the Ramah has already answered my question. If I'm lighting inside and nobody's walking by my kitchen table, I'll light it whenever I want.
So if you forget to light it the night of Hanukkah, can you light it in the morning?
Ooh, why don't you? That is a great question. Let's keep reading. However, these words are the ideal case. But if this time has passed and one has not lit, go ahead and light all night. And if the entire night has passed and one has not lit, there's no making up for it later. Wah, wah.
Oh.
And the Ramah says, on other nights, one should light like all other people, even though one did not light at first. What comparison are they making? What other mitzvah is every day that they are making an analogy to?
The Shema.
The Shema is a good example too from the first Mishnah.
My question was.
But it is the Omer.
So you could light the Hanukkah candles up till it's time to say Shema the next morning.
It's not making that. I think it's
Well,
saying it's
I'm
still night.
interpreting.
Yeah. It's got to be
What
dark
I'm
out.
seeing
It's got to be dark out. So here the analogy is the Omer, which is to say, when you do the Omer, you can say the bracha at night.
I meant up to the earliest time you could say Shema.
Sure. On the Omer, you can say the bracha that night, and then the next day, If you forgot, you can still say it, but you don't say it with a bracha, right? And there's a disagreement as well. Is each day an individual mitzvah, or do you count them all? If you miss one entirely, are you out of luck? That's the analogy here. Here we're being learned. We're learning. On all other nights, one should light like all other people, even though one did not light it first. Meaning to say, if you miss the night of Hanukkah, it doesn't matter. You just light normally the next night, just like everybody else would. So you don't like miss out on all of the other days if you fell into that halakha category, like with the Omer. Is everybody with
The
me on
basic-
that?
Like
Basic
to-
thing is it should start when it's dark. Is that correct?
Right, sunset until the end of night is all appropriate time to light Hanukkah candles. Okay,
Except for Shabbos.
It says 5 minutes. Can you
that's
define that?
yeah. So in the first, we're at 672 on the second page. It's the first paragraph. I skipped it here, which is to say it's permissible to light from Plag Mincha onward. Plag Mincha is the latest time you can do Mincha,
The latest time to start.
Mincha, which is, it's like hour, I'm not gonna remember,
10 3/4.
10 3/4, something like that, right?
But I did
So
know
meaning
what
to
that-
say it's before sunset. Right, it's
Right.
before sunset. So you can light a little earlier, but not so early. You can't like light at noon and then have it count for nighttime. Okay, moving on.
Well, it wouldn't be the right day yet.
I'm sorry,
That early wouldn't be the right day.
certainly would not be the right day. I'm gonna skip 674 because I want to cover a little bit more with our time here. But that paragraph speaks to lighting candles from other candles and what are the rules there. I don't want to talk about that, but you can read it later. It's certainly interesting. Okay, we're now on page 3. We're on the second half of the page, and here we're going to get your answer to the question: what order do we light the things on? The blessing who lights, the one who lights on the first night blesses 3 blessings. We learned this a little bit last night from the Talmud. Lahalik ner shel Hanukkah, sha'asa nisim, and shechianu. And if one did not bless on time on the first night, blesses on the second night or when they remember. Meaning to say, it's not like the Omer. Right, on the Omer, if you miss it and it's the next day, you can't say the blessing. So they're making the distinction there.
So if you miss the first night, you say Shechianu on the second night.
Correct. Number 2. And on the first night, one blesses 2 blessings, lahadlik ner shel and she'asa nisim. I'm sorry, after the first night. So this is second night onwards. The language is milel rishon ve'elech, which means from the first night onwards, but I translated it to make it easier. The Ramah says, and one who blesses all the blessings before they begin to light. So unlike Shabbat candles, where you light them, cover your eyes, and then say the blessing, and then you reveal that the candles are lit, right? Like it's a whole story. You guys know what I'm talking about? The story with the Hanukkah candles or the Shabbat candles, right? Because the whole point is that it's complicated because you would say a blessing before you do the action. But if you say the blessing for the candles and then light them, you've now contradicted Shabbat because Shabbat has started. So you light them, you say the blessing, cover your eyes and say the blessing because, oh my goodness, they're lit. What a miracle, right? Okay, this is not like that. We should say the blessings and then light. Because like all with most other mitzvot, we say the blessing and then we do it.
The shamas, do you light that before you say the blessings, or you don't light any candles until after you've said?
Oh, that's a great question. Which is, can you light the shamash first? I probably would. I would say, me personally, you ask your rabbi, right? Rabbi Hal's not in here to psak halakha for the community, so I'm not going to do that. But for me individually, at my house, what I do is I light the shamash, I say the blessings, and then I light.
Our minhag was to light the shamas, start the first blessing, and you got the light the candle.
That's very nice. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful tradition. Number 4, after one lights, they should sing or say, Hanerot halalu anu madlikin ala chuot ala nisim va'ala niflaot. So we already got to see those are some of the songs and stuff. For those who are so inclined, and you won't necessarily have this right in front of you, you won't have the book in front of you. As Rabbi Hal was saying, one of the projects that I work on is exploringjudaism.org. It's a project of the USCJ and the RA. We have added our candle lighting guide and song list guide on the website. So if you don't know, you can look on exploringjudaism.org. It'll have it on your phone. You can have the blessings, you could have the song lyrics. It's all translated and transliterated, easy for you to access. All right, that's the only pitch I'm going to make. So here, after one lights, you sing the song. And here, we're going to do number 5. Can I get a volunteer to read who hasn't read yet? Number 5. Larry.
One should begin to light on the first night with the candle farthest to the right. And on the second light, when one adds a candle, one closest to it, one begins and blesses on the added candle, there's more left, in order to turn to the candle on the right.
Pause. Okay, so you begin to light on the first night with the candle farthest to your right. Remember, Hebrew is right to left. And on the second night, you add a candle closest to it, meaning to say you have one on the right, and then you have one slightly to the left of that. You have two on the right now. One begins and blesses on the added candle because we're celebrating the new day, and we light that candle. We start with when you light leftwards to the right, right? Meaning to say we want to put them in right to left, and we light them left to right because we're honoring the new day first. All right, Larry, keep going.
And thus, on the third night, when one adds next to the two previous candles, one begins with the newly added, and with it begins the blessing, and afterwards turns to the right. And thus, on every night, one finds that they always bless on the added candle, because this teaches about the miracle that on the additional days, the miracle increased.
Right, which is to say, right, each night, the number of candles grows, and we're honoring the newest day first. Everybody, so where do we start putting them in? On the, and we light them on the, amazing. See, now you won't forget. Okay, next page. And we're come to the end here. The Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 677-2. Again, this is a selection. A child that is becoming old enough for an education and will soon be old enough to be obligated to the mitzvot needs to light.
That's 2 different times.
Potentially. Well, if it's in brackets, if it's in brackets, that's my addition. Yes. Well, so let's talk about that. So first of all, anything that's in brackets is something that I added for clarity or to. So the Hebrew itself says, "Katan shehagia lechinuch," a child that is arriving the time for education, sarik lahatlik, needs to light. And so the question becomes, what does it mean to shehigia lechinuch? And I'm suggesting that they are becoming old enough to become obligated, which is to say, a child who is let me try this a different way. What is Rabbi Yosef Karo saying about children and lighting menorah and lighting the Hanukkah? What is he trying to tell us? Not the technical part. What is he trying to tell us about education and about things? Yes.
Once the child understands what this means, they could like.
Right. So even if they're not halachically obligated, we want them to become accustomed to it. Right. We want them to get used to the idea that this is something that they do. This is a similar framework as fasting for Yom Kippur. If you look in Masechet Yoma, and which is all about Yom Kippur, it begins that process. Now we have to be much more careful because food and Hanukkah candle lighting is really not the same category. But we want to start training children so that they become accustomed to it. Not because they're obligated yet, because they're certainly not. Child is not obligated. They're not an adult. They can't make decisions the same way. But we want them to become accustomed and used to it and that. So here we get from Rabbi Yosef Karo a little bit of pedagogy about how we raise children. All right, let's read the next one. Before Shabbat begins, one should light for Hanukkah first, and then afterwards for Shabbat. This always comes up every year, right? There's one Shabbat right in the middle of Hanukkah. Which one do you light first? You light the Hanukkah candles first because why? Yeah, if you light the Shabbat candles first, you can't light the Hanukkah candles.
Technicality here. When is the earliest time you can take Shabbat in? Versus when is the earliest time you can light the candles, the Hanukkah candles?
So you can always take Shabbat in earlier because you can always add.
That's the question: is how early?
I mean, like if you
Is it
wanted
the
to take
same
it up
as
on
the- is it
Thursday,
the
you could
same
probably make the argument.
Is it the
But I
same as the Hanukkah? Or is it later than that?
It's a good question. I don't want to give an answer without knowing it.
I
I
bet
don't want to
you
be able to
knows.
give you an accurate, a specifically accurate number because I'd want to go check the Shulchan Aruch, which is regardless which is to say that you could probably, this is suggesting you could do them pretty much at the same time. There's no
Right.
real
Yeah,
conflict.
well, I mean, normally that's what you do.
All right, correct.
But the question is,
It's not like Thanksgiving where you're having dinner at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
I guess what I'm asking is, if the earliest time you can light the Hanukkah candles is Klag Hanukkah, and the earliest time you can take Shabbat in by lighting those candles is later than
Yeah,
that, then it's obvious that you do the Hanukkah candles first.
So I don't think it's making that point because just because you can do the rabbis are never going to imagine that you're going to light Hanukkah candles, go about your day, and then come back to light for Shabbat candles. You're already in candle lighting mode. So they're going to suggest, right? There's a sweet spot where you can light them at the same time, which is going to be when it's convenient and halachically appropriate, and you're going to want to light at that time. And here the Ramah speaks to your question a little bit, which it says, and blesses on them, right? Meaning to the person who lights the candles, and blesses on them on a weekday, even though they light while it's still actually day. Meaning to say, we're not changing our blessing, even though it's a little too early, because it's not quite sunset yet. So the rabbis do understand that there's like a rub here, and they're trying to make it more accessible.
Well, one of the things,
Yeah, Sheila.
one of the problems today is that, like, if we have a Shabbat dinner and it's Hanukkah, and those of us who want to light our own menorah at home, do you follow me? I guess it's more.
Yeah, you haven't ended the
problem.
You haven't ended the sentence yet.
Yeah,
what's the question?
My question is, how do you do this all? Because you can light your Hanukkah candles, you're leaving the house,
Well,
and you might light your Shabbat candles at either the synagogue or where you're going for company, where you're going for dinner.
Yeah. So I would suggest again, without psak halacha here, this is what I would do. First of all, I would make sure that if I leave the house with candles going, that they're in a safe place. We've talked about
That's
that.
what we did. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But let's assume, it's your kitchen sink kind of thing, right? Nice and safe. I would say that you can light one, that it is permissible to light your Hanukkah candles and your Shabbat candles before you leave the house. But by the time you get to wherever you're going, it's Shabbat. Even if it's not Shabbat for someone else, it's Shabbat for you. Right? Because there's that Shabbat. The question of, this is a shiur of its own, which is when does Shabbat actually start, is not as a simple question as you imagine. Because is it when you light candles? Is it when the sun sets? Is it when you do Lecha Dodi? Right? Is it when you do Kiddush? Those are not all at the same time. So what time does Shabbat actually start? It's not a simple question. A shiur for another day. Point being is,
do that for us once.
Right. I think the rabbis are trying to encourage us that it's more important to get it done, to do the mitzvah, to be engaged with Hanukkah and have it be a little earlier than it should be, than not to do it. I think that's what the rabbis are trying to say. The last thing on here is about Havdalah. On Saturday evening, we do not do Havdalah over the Hanukkah candle. This is part of what, Terry, you were making reference to. Because we do not benefit, for a different reason though, benefit from the Hanukkah candle's light, we do not bless on the candle until it is already lit. Okay, what does that mean? Think about Havdalah. You light the candle and then you start the process, right? Because Shabbat is already over. You're lighting the candle as the first thing. And then you do the blessings. So we already know that's the first distinction, because when do we say the bracha when it relates to the candle? For Hanukkah? Before we say the blessing and then we light it. So Havdalah is exactly the opposite. Okay. When we do the bracha, we don't do bracha lahadlik ner shel Havdalah. What do we say? We do say lahavdil, but that's the last blessing. We say borei. Now I'm gonna always get it wrong. Borei mirei ha'esh. Right. Thank God who made fire. Right. Then what do we do? What are people often doing during Havdalah? They're using their fingernails and to see it. Why is that? Because we're trying to make use of it. We're using the candle so that we can see something. We want it. This is a very practical thing. We are showing we're not in Shabbat by using the candle. Dafka on Hanukkah, we're not doing that. So there's a we can't use the Havdalah candle for Hanukkah because they're for totally different purposes. Okay. And we don't bless on the candle what's already lit. We already talked about. Number 2, we light the Hanukkah candle in the synagogue before Havdalah. Ramah, in any case, in one's house, one lights and afterward does Havdalah, since one already did Havdalah at synagogue. And here, the Shulchan Aruch is imagining the circumstances in which synagogue, you're going to shul and you're doing Havdalah, you're there for Mariv, you're doing Havdalah and you're lighting candles and stuff. And here, basically, they're imagining that you're at synagogue, you're doing Havdalah, you're lighting the Hanukkah candles, and you're going home and then lighting them again for yourself. I'm sorry, you're doing Havdalah at home since you, I'm sorry, let me try that again. The Ramah is imagining that you are doing Hanukkah candles and Havdalah at home, in addition to having done it at synagogue, right? The communal effort and the individual effort being distinct. All of this is
So
to
you
say,
light the Hanukkah candles in the synagogue, you do light them again at home.
correct. That's what it's
they're
suggesting.
saying. Yeah.
Okay,
But if you light them before the Havdalah, it's still Shabbat.
right, but in order to light the Hanukkah candle, it has to be, it can't be Shabbat anymore.
That's what I
So,
think.
so it's imagining that we're lighting the Hanukkah candle before Havdalah.
So that doesn't make
It's,
sense.
it's a bit
Right.
complicated. I'm not sure that I have a good answer,
Yeah.
to be totally honest. All right,
Shabbat ends when Shabbat ends. It has nothing to do with when you do Havdalah.
that,
Havdalah
yes,
you can do
yes
Tuesday
and
or
no,
Wednesday
yes,
or whatever.
yes and no. All right, with our last minutes, I know I've gone a bit over, you'll forgive me, hopefully. I just want to ask us a question here by way of conclusion, which is, first of all, we dug into some pretty technical stuff. Let's learn some Shulchan Aruch, and I appreciate you going on this very technical journey. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is, the whole point of this is to talk about the values. So let's back up for a moment. What values did you see in this collection of texts? What is Rabbi Yosef Karo and Moshe Isserles telling us about Hanukkah, about people, about community, about mitzvot? No wrong answers here. What did you see? What values did you see in here?
Well,
Hanukkah is trying to show, is for, not just for us, but also to show other people that it is our holiday. In fact, if you say it the way I'm saying it, it sounds like it's a Christmas thing. You know, Christmas, they have to display everything in the windows.
I'm no expert in Christmas, so I will leave that part to the side. But certainly your point, which is to say that Hanukkah is about us and the outside world in some way.
And also light. Again, Hanukkah is a
Right.
festival of lights, and we are lighting. We are providing light for other people to go by. I mean, this is the same thing, if you'll excuse me, the saying, as Christmas. That's why all the lights are around.
Amazing. Thank you, Sheila. I saw your hand and I see yours as well.
Light
Wait a
is
sec, wait a
big.
sec. You had yours first.
So, but what I took on that even in 1500, they were concerned about security, about all the things that are in halakha and what to do and how to do it, but also about securing the safety of others.
It's a quote from the Talmud, so it's
Yeah.
even older, from the
That's
year
correct.
400.
400. So always, bechol dor vador kamim aleinu lechalotenu. It's so true.
Yeah.
And it's true then, and it's true nowadays, unfortunately.
The rabbis understood that to be a Jew in the world is not an easy task.
No.
Yes,
Light has a deep spiritual connection. So by paying attention to all of these details, we are showing it reverence, apart from showing it to others. There's a personal sensitivity there. So we want to do it according to the highest levels of respect, because the rabbis may have differed in terms of how you go about that. I wonder what some of these experts at the time would say about electric menorahs, Hanukkahs, as they have the flickering lights and so forth. They probably would think it's over the line, but
well, without talking about what the rabbis would say about electricity, your point well made, which is that the rabbis are certainly encouraging us to pay close attention to the details. And not only that, right? Your point is extended when we think about that the rabbi said we shouldn't use the menorah for a purpose. It's there to publicize the miracle, to be present, to let that light bathe us in its own purpose, not for a purpose we've added.
I think the other thing is that I got from this that I really think about is that each light is distinct.
Mm.
And you can't just put it all with other lights. And therefore, each day that you light it is, you're thinking of the miracle.
Yeah.
Of Hanukkah.
Right, every day is its own day.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something? Oh, sorry.
No, I wanted to
Yeah.
repeat the idea of paying attention to the detail. You don't do things just any old way.
Look, the rabbis, we certainly learned that there are a lot of details and not everybody agrees on the details, but that paying attention to details matters, right? Rabbi Moshe Isserles and Rabbi Karo might disagree on which details are important, but that the details do matter,
yeah.
whatever they might be. Wonderfully well made. your point.
It's not the minor holiday that a lot of people nowadays say, yeah, it's just a holiday like candles, things like that. It's much more meaningful. Obviously, if they took the time to say that there are ways to do things, they argued about it, it's not so minor after all.
Yes, well, the perennial debate of whether or not Hanukkah is minor or not. Certainly, you've made a strong argument to say it's not so minor.
Yeah.
The Hasidic rabbis spent a tremendous amount of time on it. The Gemara spends almost no time on it. So who's to say,
Yeah.
right? But certainly it has value. Anyone else want a last word? Larry?
I was gonna say, the fact that it's not in the Torah, about Hanukkah, how does that, how does that weigh in the importance of it?
So on the back of the page here, you see a QR code. QR code is to my newsletter. You're certainly welcome to read it if you are so inclined. Some of the things I taught this weekend will be adapted for that. The sermon I gave yesterday is already on there. And in that, I make reference to the fact that the Talmud understands that it's not in the Tanakh, as instead the rabbis basically made a decision that we were commanded by God, equal to all the other mitzvot. And I think part of that is this wonderful rabbinic enterprise, right? That is not just in God's hands, right? It's that famous story from the Talmud, right? God gave us the Torah for us to do, and God's got to stay out of it now, right? We human beings get to decide how we're going to deal with it, and the rabbis decided that Hanukkah is important enough to be mitzaveh, to be commanded.
Well, aren't we to think that those rabbis that decided that, had divine inspiration? They were not any.
The rabbis certainly.
Rabbis. They were extremely.
The rabbis certainly believed that there was an existence of an oral Torah that went along with the written Torah, and that oral Torah hasn't gone away. It's what we do together here, what we do every Thursday, last pitch for the Talmud class, where we really spend some time with that and reveal what we can and discuss it. With that, I'm going to end our class. I'll stick around if anyone wants to chat. Thank you for being here. Thank you for this weekend. And